Today is May 24th, 2026, Memorial Day weekend. Deep inside a tunnel network near Isfahan, Iran, 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity sits sealed inside metal cylinders. That amount weighs about the same as a grand piano. At this moment, that uranium stockpile is the barrier between a signed peace agreement and the possibility of the United States military returning to Iran with B-2 Spirit stealth bombers carrying 30,000-pound bunker-busting weapons built for underground targets exactly like the tunnels where those cylinders are stored. Officials close to the negotiations describe the agreement between Washington and Tehran as 90% complete. The final 10% revolves around that uranium. This week, Donald Trump spoke from the Oval Office and stated clearly that the United States does not need the material, does not want Iran to keep it, and would most likely destroy it after taking possession. He added that Iran would not be allowed to retain it. Marco Rubio, speaking from New Delhi on Saturday, ended his statement with a line that carried unusual weight. He declared that the issue would be resolved one way or another. The meaning was direct. Iran either transfers the uranium through the agreement process or the military option prepared since the ceasefire on April 8th becomes active. Earlier today, Trump shared an image on Truth Social showing an American MQ-9 Reaper drone striking an Iranian swarm of fast attack boats. The image itself carried the message. The drone was the message. The next 48 hours may become the defining moment of the entire confrontation, because the uranium either leaves Tehran peacefully or another method arrives to collect it. To understand why 400 kilograms enriched to 60% matters so much, it is necessary to understand what the material represents and why both sides are releasing conflicting statements about Iran's commitments. Uranium used in civilian nuclear energy facilities is normally enriched between 3 and 5%. The material stored in Iran's tunnels has reached 60%. Weapons-grade uranium for nuclear bombs is approximately 90%. The jump from 60 to 90% is considered much smaller than the leap from natural uranium to 60%. Israeli officials have described the remaining step as technically straightforward. At 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, the stockpile could theoretically produce material for 11 nuclear weapons if enrichment reached 90%. 11. This is not a hypothetical future capability. The material already exists inside underground storage sites in Iran. International inspectors currently cannot verify its exact quantity or location because Iran expelled all IAEA inspectors on the morning of February 28th when Operation Epic Fury began. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency described the situation as a profound safeguard emergency. That language represents one of the strongest warnings issued by the organization. The inspectors are gone. The uranium remains. No independent outside authority can confirm where the cylinders are currently located. Iran transferred the uranium into those tunnels one day before bombs from Operation Midnight Hammer struck in June 2025. Satellite imagery had captured trucks loading 18 containers near the south tunnel entrance. The relocation was intentional. Iran anticipated the strikes and dispersed the material before the bombing campaign began. That is why Trump stated from the Oval Office that the United States intends to obtain the uranium one way or another because leaving it underground is viewed in Washington as unacceptable. Now, the structure of the proposed agreement becomes important because this framework defines what both governments are trying to negotiate. Based on reports from several sources, the proposed Memorandum of Understanding would begin a negotiation period lasting between 30 and 60 days to finalize the harder details. During that period, or once the agreement becomes official, several major changes would occur. The United States naval blockade on Iranian ports would be removed. That blockade has existed since April 13th and has reportedly cost Iran $500 million every day. Frozen Iranian overseas assets would be released. Those funds have remained trapped inside foreign banking systems under sanctions and financial restrictions tied to American pressure. Sanctions on Iran would be lifted in stages as Tehran fulfilled specific requirements under the agreement. The ceasefire in place since April 8th would become formally documented instead of remaining an informal arrangement. The United States and Israel would commit to ending airstrikes. Iran would retain the right to maintain a civilian nuclear program under defined limitations and inspection rules. In return, Washington expects several conditions. One major demand involves an enrichment moratorium. The United States requested 20 years. Iran proposed 5. Reports suggest the compromise may fall somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz would resume fully without the PGSMA toll Iran had attempted to impose. American blockade measures and Iran's remaining interference with shipping traffic would end at the same time. IAEA inspectors would regain broad access to verify Iranian nuclear activity whenever inspections became necessary. Then comes the unresolved issue. Iran would be required either to surrender or eliminate the enriched uranium stockpile. That condition remains the central obstacle preventing the agreement from becoming final. American officials told reporters on Saturday that Iran had made a broad commitment to transfer the uranium during Phase 1 of the agreement. On the same morning, a senior Iranian source speaking to Reuters stated that Iran had not agreed to hand over the uranium. Both statements described the same negotiations. One American official claimed Tehran accepted uranium transfer during the first phase. An Iranian official insisted no such commitment existed. This was not simply confusion over translation or wording differences. The statements revealed that separate factions inside the Iranian government were describing the negotiations in completely different ways. That contradiction may be the clearest indication yet of what is happening internally inside Iran. The civilian diplomatic faction connected to Arashi and the foreign ministry has reportedly pushed to finalize the agreement. That group understands the economic pressure created by the blockade. Officials there recognize the impact of losing $500 million per day and understand the storage crisis unfolding at Carr Island. They want a signed deal. The IRGC hardliner faction, associated with the new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei, who assumed leadership after Ali Khamenei was killed on February 28th, sees the uranium differently. For them, surrendering the stockpile represents something much larger institutionally. When American officials say Iran committed to transferring the uranium, while Iranian officials deny such an agreement, the deeper reality may be that civilian negotiators offered terms the IRGC leadership never approved. That internal split is the same fracture visible throughout the conflict itself. It appeared in clashes between the IRGC and the regular Iranian army in 4 cities. It surfaced when the parliament speaker was reportedly placed under house arrest by the IRGC for supporting negotiations. It also appeared in the sharply different public messages issued by President Pezeshkian and IRGC leadership throughout the crisis. Iran's supreme leader reportedly refuses to surrender the uranium without a written guarantee delivered in a very specific form. From his perspective, this position is rational. The historical example shaping that thinking is Libya. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya for decades and maintained a weapons of mass destruction program. In 2003, after witnessing the American invasion of Iraq, Gaddafi chose to dismantle that program voluntarily and cooperate with Western governments. Muammar Gaddafi eventually surrendered Libya's nuclear materials and chemical weapons. He restored diplomatic ties with the United States and European nations. He removed himself from the category of direct threat. Then came 2011. When armed rebels rose against his government, NATO states backed those forces with air power. Gaddafi was later captured and killed. Authoritarian governments around the world watched that sequence carefully and drew the same conclusion. Giving up strategic weapons to Western powers does not guarantee protection. It removes leverage. Once the weapons disappear and the threat fades, survival depends on the goodwill of outside governments that may not support you when crisis arrives. Mojtaba Khamenei has studied the Libyan example. So has his inner circle. Strategic planners inside the IRGC have examined it in detail as well. For them, the uranium hidden in the Isfahan tunnels is not only part of a nuclear program, it is insurance. It raises the cost and uncertainty of military action against the Iranian regime. From the IRGC perspective, surrendering the uranium before receiving an absolute written guarantee for regime survival would repeat what they consider Gaddafi's fatal mistake. That is why the hardline faction refuses to move first. This does not automatically destroy the possibility of a deal. It means the order of events matters enormously. Iran wants written guarantees first. It wants the ceasefire formalized. It wants sanctions relief implemented. It wants frozen assets released. It wants a documented commitment ending future airstrikes. Only after those protections become permanent on paper does Tehran believe the uranium issue should move forward. Washington wants the opposite sequence. The United States demands the uranium commitment during Phase 1 before sanctions relief and asset releases fully begin because American officials believe Iran has previously signed agreements while continuing prohibited activities in secret. The dispute over sequencing is not accidental. It reflects 2 governments with decades of accumulated distrust and a long history reinforcing that distrust on both sides. From New Delhi, Marco Rubio outlined 3 non-negotiable conditions. Iran must stop nuclear weapons development. The Strait of Hormuz must reopen without tolls. The enriched uranium must be transferred. Then he ended with a final sentence. The problem will be solved one way or the other. In plain terms, one way means Tehran accepts uranium transfer inside the agreement structure. The other way means the United States military resolves the issue directly through force by either seizing the uranium or destroying it underground, using weapons designed specifically for hardened tunnel complexes. This was not vague diplomatic language. It was a direct public statement from the sitting Secretary of State, indicating that if negotiations fail, military action remains fully prepared. The MQ-9 image. Donald Trump, posted on Truth Social, reinforced the same message visually. It showed the alternative. If negotiations collapse, the targeting sequence already exists. Layer 1 begins with the MQ-9 Reaper operating over the Strait of Hormuz. The aircraft flies at 50,000 feet, high enough to remain unheard from the surface. It can stay airborne for 27 continuous hours without landing. The drone carries the Lynx synthetic aperture radar system along with the multispectral targeting system. Together, those systems can follow individual IRGC fast attack boats in complete darkness through sea spray, electronic disruption, and attempted jamming. CENTCOM maintains continuous MQ-9 coverage across the entire 21 nautical mile width of the Strait of Hormuz every hour of every day. When an IRGC fast attack group activates, the MQ-9 has often already prepared a targeting solution before the boats even leave port. The system identifies which vessels will be engaged and determines the order of engagement. Each sortie carries 8 Hellfire missiles and can strike several boats during one attack run. The image Trump posted was not theoretical. It represented exactly what would happen if an IRGC formation moved through the strait while the drone remained overhead. The boats are tracked from engine startup until Hellfire impact. And those drones are already in the sky right now, monitoring the strait continuously. Layer 2 involves a system receiving far less public attention, but potentially carrying even greater importance. The 82nd Airborne Division and its Project Freedom Artificial Intelligence Command Network. The system combines MQ-9 intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance data with manned strike platforms in real time. The drone identifies a target. The artificial intelligence system classifies it, ranks priority, and immediately sends targeting information both to 82nd Airborne Headquarters and directly to F-35 pilots simultaneously. All of it happens in real time before IRGC formations can scatter or before uranium stockpiles can be relocated again. The 82nd Airborne Division has received little media attention during this conflict, yet it remains one of the most critical elements inside the targeting structure. The division deploys GBU-53 Stormbreaker munitions, small-diameter bombs equipped with multi-mode guidance systems capable of striking moving targets in poor weather conditions. It also operates advanced drone systems not yet publicly disclosed. Combined with F-35 aircraft, the network creates a sensor-to-shooter cycle measured in seconds between target identification and weapons impact. Layer 3 centers on the F-35 platform itself. Both the F-35C, launched from aircraft carriers, and the F-35B, launched from amphibious assault ships with Marine Expeditionary Units, form part of the system. The F-35B can operate from amphibious vessels without needing a full aircraft carrier deck, allowing it to move into tighter areas near the Strait of Hormuz. That flexibility creates tactical unpredictability because launch points vary from mission to mission. The aircraft's stealth capabilities make detection extremely difficult for the remaining elements of Iran's air defense network. Its sensor systems also feed information into the 82nd Airborne Artificial Intelligence Command Structure, adding another layer to the integrated targeting picture. Then comes Layer 4, the B-2 Spirit. These bombers fly round-trip missions either from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri or from the forward deployment location at RAF Fairford in Britain. The B-2 carries the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, weighing 30,000 pounds. The weapon is designed to penetrate 60 meters of reinforced concrete before exploding inside underground structures. The Isfahan tunnel complex, previously struck by Tomahawk cruise missiles during Operation Midnight Hammer, did not receive GBU-57 bunker busters at the time. Fordo and Natanz did. Now the Isfahan complex represents the specific target set the B-2 and GBU-57 system is prepared to address. If diplomacy fails and the uranium remains underground, the next option becomes rendering the site inaccessible. The bomb does not need to reach uranium stored hundreds of meters below ground. Instead, it collapses entrances, launch corridors, and access tunnels. Once sealed, everything inside remains trapped, inaccessible for further enrichment or weaponization. The leverage disappears with it. At the same time, another crisis is developing in East Asia. Taiwan's Coast Guard has entered a second consecutive day of confrontation with the Chinese Coast Guard vessel CCG-3501, a ship weighing 5,500 tons operating inside restricted waters near the Pratas Islands. This marks the 6th Chinese incursion into those same waters. Taiwan's National Security Council has also reported that 100 Chinese military vessels are currently operating inside the first island chain, the strategic island perimeter surrounding China's coastline. 100 ships. The Pratas Islands sit approximately 400 kilometers from Taiwan. The Pratas Islands are lightly protected and remain highly exposed. China is not conducting these operations by accident, while Washington focuses on the Strait of Hormuz. This is part of the same three-front strategy observed throughout the conflict. As the United States concentrates on removing Iran's uranium from the Isfahan tunnels before the ceasefire window closes, Beijing is positioning Coast Guard and naval forces against Taiwan's outer defensive perimeter. The message from China has remained consistent during the entire Iran crisis. Beijing believes it understands how to exploit moments when American attention is divided. At the same time, the Trump administration is managing several simultaneous crises. Negotiations with Iran continue. Developments in the Ukraine war are ongoing, including the massive attack on Kiev that occurred last night. House Republicans were also forced to cancel the War Powers Resolution vote because defeat appeared likely. Now, Taiwan is under pressure at the same moment. 4 pressure points, 4 separate theaters. This is the multipolar challenge shaping the broader strategic picture. If the Iran uranium agreement succeeds, one major pressure point disappears and American military focus can shift more effectively toward the remaining fronts. The next 48 hours now become critical. The agreement itself is reportedly 90% complete. The unresolved issue remains the uranium stockpile. American officials say Iran made a general promise to surrender it. Iranian officials publicly deny giving such a commitment. Between those two positions lies the operational gap that must be closed within the next 48 hours through verification, sequencing, and physical supervision of any uranium transfer process. 3 outcomes appear most likely. The first possibility is a finalized agreement containing a clear and verifiable uranium transfer mechanism built directly into Phase 1 before sanctions relief and frozen asset releases fully begin. That is the American position. If IRGC hardliners authorize the civilian diplomatic faction to formalize the commitment in binding written form under inspection procedures, the agreement moves forward. The blockade ends. Frozen funds are released. The ceasefire becomes formal policy. Iran keeps a civilian nuclear program under inspections, while surrendering the enriched material linked to potential production of 11 nuclear weapons. From Washington's perspective, this produces the most stable outcome. The only faction likely dissatisfied would be the IRGC hardliners who consider the uranium a guarantee of institutional survival. The second possibility involves a signed agreement containing vague uranium language, interpreted differently by Tehran and Washington, while transfer of the material is delayed into later phases instead of Phase 1. That appears closer to the Iranian negotiating position. Under this structure, Tehran would receive sanctions relief, gain access to frozen assets, secure the formal ceasefire, and then negotiate uranium transfer later from a stronger bargaining position. American officials fear this outcome because they believe previous Iranian nuclear agreements followed a similar pattern. Economic relief arrives first. Iran stabilizes economically. Then, leverage for forcing uranium surrender weakens as Tehran's dependence on the deal declines. From the American side, this becomes the reverse version of the Gaddafi lesson. Once pressure disappears, rebuilding that pressure requires restarting the confrontation. The third possibility is failure. If the uranium dispute cannot be resolved during the current 48-hour window, the United States military may activate the targeting chain already positioned in the region. MQ-9 drones would continue targeting remaining IRGC fast attack boat formations inside the strait. F-35 aircraft combined with the 82nd Airborne Division's Artificial Intelligence Fusion Network would strike coastal and underground targets. Then, the B-2 Spirit carrying GBU-57 bunker busters would focus directly on the Isfahan tunnel complex, where the sealed uranium cylinders are believed to remain. Each outcome creates a different strategic result. The first scenario, verified uranium transfer during Phase 1, delivers the strongest available outcome from the American perspective. Iran preserves its nuclear enrichment infrastructure, but loses the existing enriched stockpile and accepts a 12 to 15-year enrichment moratorium under international inspections. The blockade ends, economic pressure across the region eases, American military assets can shift away from Gulf operations. China also loses the strategic distraction window it has been using near Taiwan. Iran receives the economic relief it urgently needs without facing total surrender that its political system would reject. Still, this would not represent a complete American victory. Iran would retain enrichment capabilities. The 12 to 15-year moratorium falls short of the 20 years Washington originally demanded. And Iran may eventually do exactly what analyst Danny Citrinowicz predicted, by presenting cooperation publicly, while continuing covert activity behind the scenes. Even so, the agreement would remove 11 nuclear weapons worth of enriched material from Iranian control and establish an inspection structure capable of detecting violations more quickly. The second scenario, an ambiguous agreement with delayed uranium transfer, creates the outcome Benjamin Netanyahu warned about, and Danny Citrinowicz described as deeply flawed. Iran gains economic recovery while keeping the stockpile that gives credibility to its nuclear threat. Any future enrichment moratorium would then be negotiated from a position of Iranian economic strength instead of desperation. As sanctions pressure fades, the chances of Tehran voluntarily surrendering the uranium later would likely decline further. The third scenario returns the region to military escalation. Renewed strikes could destroy or permanently bury the Isfahan facility, but there would still be no absolute guarantee that all 400 kilograms of uranium had been reached or rendered unusable. The conflict would restart with major economic consequences Gulf states have desperately tried to avoid. Iran would also gain a narrative claiming the United States broke the ceasefire while negotiations were close to success. At the same time, Washington would face another war powers confrontation after House Republicans already canceled one vote because they expected defeat. When all these pieces are assembled together, one conclusion becomes clear. Donald Trump does not appear to be bluffing about solving the issue one way or the other. The MQ-9 image posted on Truth Social and Marco Rubio's statement from New Delhi both signal real military capability already positioned and ready. The uranium remains Iran's final major bargaining card. The IRGC understands that reality. Mojtaba Khamenei understands it as well. That explains why the civilian diplomatic faction seeks to protect the uranium through negotiation sequencing, while IRGC hardliners openly deny agreeing to surrender it. Iran is not operating as a single unified actor. Two competing factions are making different survival calculations and communicating them through contradictory public statements issued on the same day. One faction sees the economic pressure and wants the agreement completed. The other faction controls the military structure and nuclear program and believes surrendering the uranium without absolute guarantees would repeat the Gaddafi mistake. The agreement succeeds only if IRGC hardliners authorize the civilian negotiators to formalize the uranium transfer commitment in binding form. As of Saturday, May 24, 2026, that authorization still had not occurred. That is why the agreement remains 90% complete, while the MQ-9 image appears on Truth Social the very same morning. At the center of everything sits 400 kilograms of uranium weighing roughly the same as a grand piano, enough material for 11 potential nuclear weapons, one tunnel complex outside Isfahan, a ceasefire holding since April 8th, a deal nearly complete, a supreme leader carrying both his father's defiance and his father's understanding of the Gaddafi lesson, a Secretary of State declaring the issue will be solved one way or the other, an MQ-9 maintaining non-stop overwatch at 50,000 feet above the Strait of Hormuz, already tracking any IRGC boat formation that may deploy, a B-2 Spirit capable of flying from Missouri, or Britain carrying the GBU-57 weapon built specifically for underground targets, and 48 hours that may determine whether the Grand Piano leaves Iran peacefully on a transport convoy or remains buried forever beneath the mountain where it has been hidden since the day before Operation Midnight Hammer struck in June 2025. Iran insists it never agreed to surrender the uranium. The United States says Tehran already made a general commitment. The MQ-9 overhead does not recognize the distinction. It already knows where the boats are. The B-2 already knows where Isfahan is located. One way or the other means exactly what those words imply. If you want more deep coverage on military strategy, geopolitical conflict, and global power shifts, stay connected for the next breakdown. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.